I'm going to talk a little bit about my novel now. It's called A Tender Thing, as I mentioned, and it is set in 1958 in the world of Broadway musical theater. I chose that year specifically because that was when Broadway musicals were really in their golden age. Although that kind of implies that musicals are no longer in a golden age and like good work isn't being created anymore, which is not true. But that was when there were so many writers and a lot of things were being produced and really solidifying the art form into a popular piece of American culture. And choosing to set a novel in that time really leads us into talking about historical fiction. And I've always been attracted to historical fiction as a reader because you are sort of time traveling while also staying in the present, and you're looking at a story from two perspectives, right? You're looking at it from when the characters are living in it, in this case in 1958, and you're also reading it in 2020. So you're thinking about how things might be different now than they were then. So A Tender Thing is about a young woman who moves from Wisconsin to New York to star in a Broadway musical that's being written. It's about the rehearsal process and how you write a musical and how you get it from the rehearsal studio all the way to Broadway. And the musical is controversial because it is the first interracial musical on Broadway starring a Black man and a white woman who fall in love, and that's depicted on stage, seeing them fall in love with each other. And again, I chose 1958 because it was a time right before the civil rights movement and feminism movements of the 60s. So it's right on the verge of these ideas becoming really a part of the American consciousness. And in the theater scene, which was a very transgressive and progressive place, these ideas were being thought about and talked about a couple years earlier than they might have been brought to the rest of the country. So that's why I love historical fiction, is because it takes you on this journey and can teach you something about the past. And it also can teach you about, you know, how ideas came to be, how change came to happen, like how the world you live in now began to be possible. So I worked on this novel for about 2 years before I sent it out to agents. And I just say that because I think sometimes the process of writing a novel or getting published can seem really opaque and difficult, and like there's a 1,000 steps between where you want to be and where you are. But really, the majority of the work is done on your own, at home, by yourself, writing. And only once you have a manuscript can you even think about all those things. And it's really important to just remember that every single person who's ever written a book wrote it by themselves on their own in their room, and or at the library or wherever. But if that's something that you want to do, the first step is to write. And my first draft I was really not happy with, and it took a long time of going over it and just continuing to put in time and write and research and just like keep plugging away at it until I was proud of the draft that I had, and then start the process of the business side of things, the details, and writing a query letter, which is really similar to a cover letter, to find an agent, and then working with them. And it's really the most important thing is to have a manuscript. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you begin thinking of a character today and begin thinking of research. Now, historical fiction is different than contemporary fiction because you have to think about the differences between then and now, obviously. And that often requires a lot of research, which can seem daunting. So if you're trying to think about, if you wanted to write, for example, my mentee wrote a story set in World War II for the end of the year, Girls Right Now Live. And at first it was like, how do you set something in World War II? There's all kinds of things you have to think about. But slowly we started building the steps of the questions she had to answer in order to flesh out her story and make it make sense and be both historically accurate and so that she could feel like she knew enough of the research that she didn't have to think about it all the time, and she could just write from the character's perspective. Because it's fiction, it's not a textbook. So you want to know the information and have the information in your head, but you don't walk down the street thinking about, well, we do think about who's president of the United States nowadays, but normally it's like you're thinking about what you're going to have for lunch, or if you're going to see your friend later that day. And people in the past were doing that kind of thing too. So it's this balancing act of having this historical information that you can like dress your set with as if you're designing a theater piece or a film, but knowing it and then letting it go so that you can write people who feel authentic to any time period. There's a phrase, perfect is the enemy of good. And I think especially in a first draft, remember that no one likes their first draft. That's why it's called a first draft. And if you're thinking about making it perfect, then you're never going to finish anything. And it's like, who cares if there are some factual errors? You have time to fix it. That's why you spend so long working on something on your own. And thinking about books on the shelf, like your favorite books, it's really good to learn to write, but you should also remember that they spent years on that, and multiple people whose entire job it is to read, check the facts, do all these things, they worked on those books too. So if your first draft doesn't look like that, well, nobody's does. So again, yeah, just being like forgiving of yourself. So this is when we're going to begin by just jotting down a lot of details, and then we're going to have a chance to share before we start writing sentences that will become a scene. So don't worry yet about making something sound good. So this is called memory mining, and we're going to start, in case you didn't, you can pick a year in the past, and it can either be from a historical event that you find interesting, or even a memory of your own from your own life, because 2005 is the past as well. You can think of a time, just any time in the past. It doesn't have to be the distant past, so that you don't have to do a ton of research while we're here tonight. So pick a memory, and then just write down the practical details of that place, or that time and place. Where was it? What year was it? So you can read this slide yourself. But as you can see, these details are important to think about how a place looked and just the big broad brushstrokes of what was happening. So for example, if you're going to pick 1958, there was President Eisenhower, and you can think about the kinds of clothes that they're going to wear. They go to see the movie The Fly in theaters in the book, which was a popular movie at the time. So just go through and just make a messy list of everything you can think of from this time period. So now that you've thought about the big things all around this person, just pick like any human being that you can think of. They can be based on you if you want, or they can be totally fictional. So first think about just a person, their age, think about if they have siblings, are they affluent, are they not affluent, are they in school, are they working, all these kinds of big things. And then this is the most important question, I think, is number 2. What do they want? And since we're going to be writing a scene, you should think of 2 things. You think of their big want. So that, if you're talking about a novel, would be the thing that they want for the whole book. So in A Tender Thing, Eleanor wants to be a Broadway star. That's her big want. And then in every scene, she wants something smaller. So what is the thing that in this scene they want? Do they want to convince their mom to let them go to the movies? Do they want to leave school for the day and go get candy with their friends at a cafe? Something like that. What are they trying to accomplish here, now, right now? And it's interesting if you think about how the time period might affect the things that they want. So using the example of the Iranian Revolution, if the big picture is about going to school, that's going to be a different question than if we're writing about a woman in New York in 2020. So taking all these things into account, then you think of character B, who is the person opposite them in their scene, their mom, their friend, their teacher, something that they're trying to, that person is in the way not giving them what they want. Character A has to get something from character B. And you should also know what character B wants. This doesn't necessarily have to appear in your scene, but it's going to inform why or why not, why they give character A what they want or why they don't give character A what they want. So we're going to take the characters from characters A and B, and we're going to construct a scene using the wants that you thought of last time. And if you can, you should try to think about some of the details that you thought of in the exercise 1 and how you can use them to flesh out the work in the scene. And by the end of the scene, something should have changed. They don't need to get what they want, but they should maybe realize something about character B or about themselves, anything. Just the end of the story is not the same as the beginning. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. That was so wonderful. This is a really great bright spot in my quarantine experience. So thank you so much.